A folded $10 bill sat on the edge of the table like a verdict waiting to be read. It had not been tossed or crumpled or dropped. It had been placed, precisely, deliberately, with the particular care of a man who had thought about this moment before he walked through the door. The bill stood folded at its center, catching the single overhead light, and it looked less like a tip than like a question someone had decided to ask out loud. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago does in November, pressing itself against every window and gap and threshold, cold and indifferent. The kind of night that makes the inside of even a faded diner feel like a mercy. The coffee machine hissed. A couple in the far booth spoke in the low, private register of people who had forgotten anyone else was there. The neon sign above the door buzzed once and settled. The clock above the kitchen pass-through read 11:47 p.m. Iris DeMille was on hour 9 of a 10-hour shift. Her feet ached in the specific deep bone way that only late-shift diner work produces. Her face showed none of it. That was a skill she had developed long before she put on an apron. The man in booth 9 had come in at 11:03 and ordered black coffee and a slice of pie without looking at the menu. He wore a canvas jacket washed too many times, a wide-brimmed hat he had not removed, and hands that rested on the table the way hands rest when their owner has learned to keep them visible. He was watching the room, not the unfocused way tired people watch, but the way people watch when they are counting exits. The other customers had filed him under nobody and moved on. Iris did not. Not because of the man himself, because of the man by the window. Her manager Dale had appeared twice at the kitchen pass-through, pointing at the clock. Iris had refilled booth 9's coffee without being asked and bought herself more time. She did not think about what she was doing. She simply acted on pattern recognition before she had words for why. When the check came, Hiroshi Sato placed the folded $10 bill on the table and watched her. Iris looked at the bill, then at him. She set the check holder down without touching the money, leaned forward with both hands flat on the table, the posture of a woman who had decided the cost of saying nothing was finally higher than the cost of saying something, and spoke in a voice low enough that only the two of them could hear. "I'm not going to take that. But before you go, you should know the man 2 booths back has been watching you since you sat down. Earpiece, left ear. He's been on his phone twice but hasn't looked at the screen once. He's not waiting for a call. He's waiting for a signal." Hiroshi did not move, did not look toward the window, did not, by any observable measure, react at all. He simply watched Iris with the careful, complete attention of a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the last 48 minutes. He said, very quietly, "Tell me what else you see." Iris told him, in under 90 seconds, in the vocabulary of a trained professional: sightline geometry, communication device configuration, exit coverage, the specific body language of a man who was not eating, but performing, eating. She did not rush. She simply reported, the way she had been trained to report, the way she had not reported anything to anyone in 4 years. When she finished, the diner continued its low, indifferent hum. The clock read 11:52. Hiroshi sat with what she had given him for a long moment. Then he slid the $10 bill across the table toward her. "Keep it," he said. "You have earned considerably more than that." He stood, put on his hat, and walked to the door without looking at the window, and without looking back. The operative left 93 seconds after him. Iris was alone with the $10 bill and the particular, clarifying quiet of a woman who has just said the true thing after 4 years of silence and discovered the world did not end. It had, in fact, only just begun. Welcome to Damel Chronicles. If you want to know how far this goes, you know what to do. Kindly hit that subscribe button and share. By the time Hiroshi stepped out into the cold Chicago night, he had been carrying the weight of a particular kind of knowledge for 6 weeks. Not a diagnosis. Something in some ways harder to hold. A document. 43 pages prepared by a private forensic accountant he trusted completely, detailing the financial architecture of a plan to remove him, not from his position, from existence. The board vote to declare him incompetent had been filed in a court he hadn't known about until 16 days ago. The surveillance had begun 11 weeks before that. The money trail ran through 3 shell companies and resolved, at its source, to 3 names: Kenji Mori, David Ashford, Priya Venkat. He had promoted all 3 of them personally. He had not come to Chicago to test anyone's character. He had come because the forensic accountant's documents contained a name. A security analyst quietly removed from her position 4 years ago via a false report filed by a man now on Hiroshi's own payroll. The name was Iris DeMille. He had dressed in the canvas jacket and the worn hat as operational cover. His own security apparatus had been compromised. Moving through the city with his usual profile was not safe. The diner was the last known address of a woman his enemies had tried to bury. He had come to see if they had succeeded. In his 3 days moving through the city without the buffer of his name or his office, he had been invisible in the way that money makes visible. Completely, without exception, as if personhood were a subscription service he had allowed to lapse. A hotel concierge had looked past him. A cab had slowed, assessed, and accelerated. A security guard at a building he had personally financed had moved him off the steps without once registering his face. He had expected this. He had read about it. He had, in the abstract way of powerful men who believe they understand what they have not experienced, thought he understood it. He had not. Within 3 minutes of sitting down in the diner, the waitress had clocked his operative. The same operative his own compromised security team, with their budget and clearances, had failed to identify in 11 weeks. She had done it because it was the true thing, and she was, underneath 4 years of careful self-erasure, someone who could not help but see clearly. Standing on the sidewalk afterward, Hiroshi replayed her 90-second report with the attention he normally reserved for contract negotiations. She had said, "I'm not going to take that," about a $10 bill at the end of a 10-hour shift in a city where she was starting over from nothing. Not because she was performing integrity, because it was the correct thing, and she was, in some fundamental and apparently indestructible way, someone who defaulted to the correct thing when given the choice. He reached into his jacket for the card his private attorney Castellan had given him 3 days ago, with a single instruction. When you find her, call this number first. He did not call it yet. He put the card back. He had one more thing to do before he could offer her anything. He had to make sure that when he did, it could not be taken back. Not by a board, not by a court, not by the 3 people who had already tried to take everything once and nearly succeeded. Through the diner window, he could see the faint shape of Iris DeMille clearing booth 9, moving with the efficiency of someone who has learned to be thorough even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. He straightened his collar, walked to his car, and began making calls. The diner opened at 6 and Iris was there at 5:50, turning on the coffee urns in the particular order she had determined, in her first week, produced the least equipment strain over a 12-hour day. She did this without thinking about it. She did most things without thinking about them. That was the problem. And also, most mornings, the only thing keeping her functional. The rejection email had arrived at 4:17 a.m. 4 lines. The 4th thanked her for her interest. The first 3 explained, in the careful language of institutional self-protection, that her application could not move forward at this time. It did not say why. It did not need to. She knew what they had found and in what order they had found it. Her name first. Then the file. Then, presumably, they had stopped reading. She folded her phone into her apron pocket and went to work. By 7:30, she had mentally cataloged everyone in the diner, The contractor in the window booth who kept his back to the wall and checked the door every 4 minutes. Not threat, just habit. The woman at the counter whose cup-to-lip ratio had dropped to the frequency of someone wanting a second coffee but unwilling to ask. The two men near the kitchen conducting some variety of low-stakes negotiation who would need separate checks. She noted the new crack in the front window already letting in cold air. She noted the table 4 wobble that would spill something before noon. She noted all of it and said none of it and carried the coffee and smiled when smiling was called for. The diner was loud enough to require concentration and small enough to require none. That was the particular exhaustion of it, not the work, but the ratio. She was running at 12% of her capacity, and the other 88 had nowhere to go except inward, cataloging, annotating, filing. She was very good at filing things she had nowhere to put. Hiroshi Sato had built his company from a single logistics contract worth $340,000. The last time he had known exactly what everything cost. That was 31 years ago. He was 58 now, and the company was worth $34 billion. And he was sitting in the back of a car watching a video call on a tablet propped against the seat in front of him. The 3 faces on the screen talking about quarterly projections in the register of people performing normalcy for an audience they believed wasn't paying attention. Hiroshi was paying attention. He had been paying attention for 6 weeks. To the particular quality of pauses in meetings, the things not said in rooms where things were usually said, the way Priya Venkat had looked at her phone during his last board address, and then at Kenji Mori, and then at nothing. He watched the 3 faces complete their performance and end the call, and felt the last of his patience leave him cleanly, like a tide that had finally decided it was done. He closed the tablet, told his driver to pull over, and transferred to the second car he had arranged for exactly this contingency. No logged route, no security detail, no name. He drove himself north on Michigan Avenue toward a part of the city where his name meant nothing. The encrypted file had contained, among its 43 pages, one address: a diner. A woman named Iris DeMille. Last known location. Current employment. He wanted to see her before he made any decisions that could not be unmade. His attorney Castellan had already spent 48 hours preparing a dossier from the documents Iris's name had surfaced in, assembling the false report, the authorization signature, the paper trail connecting all 3 to a name Iris had been close to exposing 4 years ago. Castellan had also, on Hiroshi's instruction, arranged for a private security contact to maintain discreet surveillance on the block surrounding Iris's building, passive, non-intrusive, present. If the board's operatives had found Iris's name in the same documents, Hiroshi needed to know the moment her situation changed. He wanted to see her before any of that mattered. He drove north into the November dark, the morning after. He was in booth 9 at 6:15, before the morning rush, before Dale arrived, before anyone who might recognize either of them had reason to be there. The folder Castellan had prepared sat on the table beside his coffee. Closed, unremarkable, manila, the kind that contains either nothing important or everything. Iris sat down across from him without taking off her jacket. She had not yet decided to stay. He slid the folder across the table without preamble. She opened it. Her face did what her face had learned to do over 4 years of practice. Nothing. She read with the systematic discipline of someone processing a document for content rather than reaction. She did not speed up when she reached the false report, and did not slow down when she reached the name beside the authorization signature, though Hiroshi, so watching her with the full attention he normally reserved for contract negotiations, noted the single moment, half a second, no more, when her jaw set in a way that was not quite anger, and not quite recognition, but lived precisely between the two. 6 minutes. She closed the folder. How long have you had this? 6 weeks. She absorbed that. What do you want from me? I want to know, Hiroshi said, with the careful precision of a man who has rehearsed the sentence and still finds it inadequate. If what they were afraid you'd find is what I think it is. Iris looked at the closed folder, at the window, at the coffee she hadn't touched, and the gray morning outside the glass, and the particular shape of a decision she had not expected to be making at 6:20 on a Wednesday. She looked at him. "Order something," she said. "This is going to take a while." The hotel suite was registered to a consulting firm that existed on paper in 3 states, and in practice nowhere. Ashford had arranged it. David Ashford had a talent for structures that were technically legal until the moment they weren't, and it had made him very useful and, he had always assumed, very safe. They had been in the suite for 40 minutes. The timeline had been moved up. Not a decision any of them had wanted, but the forensic accountant's disappearance had introduced a variable the original schedule could not absorb. When timelines developed variables, Ashford tightened them. The operative's report came in at 6:43 a.m. Sato had been observed the previous night at a diner on the north side, in conversation with an unidentified woman. The meeting had lasted approximately 48 minutes. The operative had managed one image on exit, partial, low light, but workable. He sent it through. Kenji Mori looked at it and said nothing. Ashford looked at it and felt the specific unease of a man recognizing a shape he cannot yet name. Priya Venkat looked at it and went completely still. Long enough that both men looked at her. She was staring at her phone with the arrested attention of someone doing rapid internal arithmetic and not liking the sum. "That's Iris DeMille," she said. The room changed. Not the temperature exactly. Something more specific. The quality of the silence shifted from the silence of people managing a problem to the silence of people who have just discovered the problem is larger than the container they built for it. Mori said, "Who?" Venkat set her phone face down on the table. "Someone we should have made sure of," she said. 4 years ago. They worked in the diner before it opened, in Castellan's secured office 3 blocks west, and once, at 2 in the morning, in Iris's apartment at a kitchen table too small for the documents spread across it. Though by the following evening, every document from that session had been transferred to Castellan's office. Iris had insisted on it. Her threat model had updated. The first 12 hours were transactional. Iris reconstructed from memory and from the files she had kept, backed up on a drive she had carried across 4 apartments over 4 years. Not because she had a plan for them, but because throwing them away had felt like accepting a verdict she had not agreed to. The evidence trail she had been building when the false report was filed. It was not complete. She had been removed before she could finish it. But what she had was specific, dated, and corroborated by documents she hadn't known were corroborating it at the time. Hiroshi told her the full extent of it on the second day. The shell companies, the vote structure, the operative network, the accelerated timeline, in the flat, factual register of a man 6 weeks past the emotional response and arrived at the operational one. Iris received it the same way, and somewhere in the exchange they arrived, without discussing it, at the specific frequency of 2 people who have each been catastrophically wrong about who they could trust and have consequently developed, as a survival mechanism, a very high tolerance for uncomfortable truths, stated plainly. The picture that assembled itself was worse than either of them had held alone. Her fragment and his fragment were not parallel investigations into related problems. They were the same investigation, split down the middle 4 years ago by a false report filed to prevent exactly this. The 2 halves, finding each other. Iris looked at the completed picture for a long time. "They weren't trying to bury evidence," she said. "They were trying to bury me specifically." "Yes, because I was already close. Before you knew what you were close to." The wariness between them had not disappeared. It had simply become, over 48 hours, the kind of wariness that functions as its own form of trust. "All right," she said. "Show me the rest." She knew before she opened the door. Not from anything visible. The lock was intact, the frame undamaged. Something quieter. A displacement of air, or the particular stillness of a space recently rearranged back to its original position by someone careful, but not careful enough. Because Iris had spent 4 years in this apartment and knew where everything was not just by sight, but by the accumulated muscle memory of 1,000 identical mornings. The laptop was closed exactly as she'd left it, but facing 2 degrees left. The kitchen drawer was shut completely. She never closed it fully because the runner stuck, and she had learned to leave it a centimeter open rather than fight it twice a day. Small things. Precise things. The message was not in what had been touched, but in how carefully it had been replaced. We were here. Man, we were thorough. And we want you to know it. She did not call anyone immediately. She went to the closet and took down the bag she had packed and repacked twice, against a contingency she had hoped was paranoia. She added 3 items she hadn't included before, zipped the bag, and stood in the center of her apartment for a single moment. Looking at the furniture sourced from street corners, the window facing the opposite building's brick wall, the life constructed to be sufficient. Then she took out the diner napkin with the number on it. Hiroshi answered on the first ring. They've been in my apartment. Castellan's contact on your block flagged movement an hour ago. I was waiting for your call. There's a car 2 blocks east, gray. Leave now. She left. In the back of the car, the city moving past tinted windows. Iris sat with her hands flat and still in her lap, and felt for the first time in 4 years the particular quality of a mind running at the speed it was built for. It did not feel like fear. It felt like coming back online. Castellan's secured offices occupied a floor above a title company in the West Loop, maintained, Iris noted, for exactly this category of situation. She filed this and said nothing about it. There were more pressing things to file. They worked for 19 hours across 2 days. The structure of it was this. Hiroshi's financial documentation established the board's motive and mechanism. Castellan's communication intercepts established intent. 11 weeks of messages between the 3 board members and the operative that said, in the careful coded language of people who believed they were being clever, exactly what they were planning and when. Iris's reconstructed evidence established precedent. 4 years of prior conduct that transformed the current plot from an isolated act of greed into the 3rd chapter of a continuous operation. Together, they produced 200 pages that told one story from 3 angles, and the story was airtight in the way that only stories built from primary documentation are airtight. Not because it was persuasive, but because it was simply, completely, true. Castellan was mid-sentence about indexing when she stopped. Iris had taken the financial cross-reference she'd been building for 3 hours, identified the single document connecting Venkat directly to the operative's original retainer 4 years ago, and placed it in the precise position where it would land with the most legal force. 40 seconds, without looking up. Castellan looked at Hiroshi. He said nothing. He had stopped being surprised by Iris 2 days ago. At 11:40 p.m., Iris squared the final section, set it on the stack, and looked at the assembled case the way she looked at everything. Completely, methodically, without sentiment. This is enough, she said. A pause. There's one more thing I need to do. She put on the apron at 10:47 p.m. Dale didn't ask why she was back. She had texted that she needed the hours, and Dale, who was not a complicated man, had said fine. She tied the apron strings, picked up the coffee pot, and went to work. The diner received her without ceremony, as if she had never left. 47 floors above the city, the 3 board members had convened what was logged as an emergency session. Ashford had ensured the paperwork cited urgent regulatory filings requiring immediate signatory approval, a structure plausible enough to explain the hour and ordinary enough to survive later scrutiny. The vote was scheduled for 11. It would take 12 minutes. By 11:15, controlling interest would have moved, and the operative would have his signal, and then the thing they had been building toward for 4 years would simply be finished. The two men came in at 10:53. They sat at the counter without ordering. Iris filled the coffee at table 6. She noted their positions, their sight lines, the way the nearer one had placed himself between her and the door. She carried the pot back to the station and looked at the clock. On the 47th floor, Ashford called the vote to order. Maury seconded. Venkat reached for her pen and noticed, for the first time, that the floor outside the boardroom glass held more people than a building at 11 p.m. should. Iris walked to the kitchen. She had 30 seconds. She dialed, and when it connected, she said 3 words: flat and certain. And the way she said everything that mattered: they're here early. What happened next happened simultaneously and took 4 minutes. And when it was over, the diner was very quiet, and the 47th floor was very quiet, and the operative was zip-tied to a counter stool, and the 3 board members were in separate rooms with separate agents, and Priya Venkat was saying, for the first time in her professional life, nothing at all. Iris picked up the coffee pot. Table 6 needed a refill. She went to do her job. 3 weeks later, Iris's personnel file was 4 pages shorter and legally clean for the first time since she was 23. The federal charges against Maury, Ashford, and Venkat had been filed in 2 jurisdictions. The operative was in custody, facing a list of charges that included, at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, the 4-year-old false report that had started all of it. Castellan had called to tell her this. Iris had said thank you, ended the call, and sat very still in her apartment for approximately 90 seconds before getting up and making coffee. There was no adequate response to the return of something that should never have been taken, and she had learned not to perform the responses she didn't feel. She felt it. She simply felt it quietly, the way she did everything that mattered. He came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Same booth, same hat. He ordered black coffee and a slice of pie without looking at the menu, which he had never needed, and when Iris came to the table, he placed a folded piece of paper in front of her and said nothing. She read it standing up. Director of Global Security, Sato Industries. The salary was a number she did not let herself react to. The title was the one she had been qualified for the day they decided she knew too much. She set it down. She looked at him. I still think the pie is overpriced. Hiroshi Sato reached into his jacket and placed a single $10 bill beside the offer letter, folded once, catching the light exactly as it had 3 weeks ago. This time, he said, it's just a tip. Iris looked at the bill. She thought about 4 years of rejection emails and backed up hard drives, and running at 12% capacity in a room too small for what she was. She thought about the particular cost of being right when the wrong people are listening. Then she picked up the bill, folded it once, put it in her apron pocket. I'll get your coffee, she said. She did not look back. Booth 9 sat behind her, quiet and exactly the right size, and she did not need to look back because she already knew what was in it. For the first time, so did the world. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story from DeMille Chronicles.